I'm joined by Alf Arteaga from 3 Yards Per Carry today, and we are going to discuss a multitude of things, including Tyreek Hill and if moving him is the best way to keep the Miami Dolphins' window to win open, or are we too late and has that window for the Miami Dolphins to win already closed? Plus, we're going to have a ton of draft talk. We'll talk about the offense and defense heading into the 2025 NFL offseason and so much more. So do me the favor, smash that like button. Subscribe if you are new as we are on our way to 20K. And as always, let's get into this.
Loses the football. Touchdown! Got it!
You have got to be kidding me.
Jalen Waddle has a Dolphin touchdown.
And he will score!
Field down the near side, man open. Touchdown!
The run from Tua Tagovailoa.
Touchdown!
He's going deep. He's going to open a touchdown again. Beautiful day to be a Dolphin fan. Let's go!
What's good, Fin Nation? What's good? It's your boy Reason. We're back here for another one. Today I'm joined by my friend, my colleague in this community, one of the best people I've met in this community. Had the pleasure of meeting him one-on-one at training camp last year as well. Alf from 3 Yards Per Carry, rocking the Only Fin shirt and letting y'all know which Discord is the only Discord you should join. And you know what, Alf, I forgot to mention this when we were talking. If I actually had Discord, I would join, my friend. So let that sit well with you, bro. But how are you doing, sir? The Super Bowl is over. We are officially into off season with the combine a few weeks away. Then free agency, the tampering window, then free agency, and then obviously the draft. How are you feeling as the Dolphin fans start to pack their pipes of Hopium?
Yeah, I'm feeling better because that Super Bowl was not the greatest thing if you wanted Dolphin fans to get over this season. They're still not over it, but you could kind of tell that another week and that's done. And the Hopium will return and we'll get back to doing what we do best, which is have awesome off seasons.
Speaking of the offseason, let's start off right there. One of the main topics has been what's going to happen with Jevon Holland coming off a down year. And really, you can make the argument, Jevon Holland's never been quite the same since those injuries against the Jets. I believe it was in the Black Friday game when he had those two separate knee/joint injuries. He's never quite been the same. He's looking for a big payday. One thing that Athletes First has done a great job with Jevon Holland is they've kept his name in the mouths of all the talking heads in the mainstream media in regards of one of the top young defenders in the NFL. How do you see this playing out? Because, from what I understood, he wants Winfield Jr. type of money, and that was the range he was in before the season started. How do you see this playing out? Do you think this is going to be a safety room that needs to be rebuilt? And really, Alf, in 2024, that safety room was the Achilles heel of this defense and one of the weakest units in terms of production on the team. What are your thoughts on Jevon Holland and the safety unit moving into the offseason?
Well, here's where I'm not going to offer any hopium here, okay? All right? I thought Jevon Holland was downright bad this past season, but I don't think that's going to matter. I think it's entirely possible that he's going to get a very, very large contract somewhere else. I think it's entirely possible that he's going to become a star once again, okay? that he'll be worth every penny, but I also think that it's irresponsible for Miami to pay him. So I don't know if that makes sense. Okay.
It does. Yeah.
Okay. So look, it's not going to happen here because it hasn't happened here. I do agree with you. Something happened to him after those injuries, and he hasn't been the same player. He was just bad. He was bad this season. He was a bad player this season. Okay. If you didn't know anything about Jevon Holland, you would have said, okay, this is a minimum guy. This is a guy that's going to bounce around the league. And he's not going to be a guy who's going to be commanding $18, $19 million a year, which is what he wants. So I think it's entirely possible, and who knows, maybe even likely. He's going to go somewhere else. He's going to get paid. He's going to be really, really, really good. And in a year from now, Dolphin fans are going to say, oh, why did you let Jevon Holland leave? Why did you let him walk? And the answer is going to be because it would have been irresponsible to sign him.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you're paying for. You don't know if you're paying for the guy from 2021 or if you're paying for the guy who just had this season this past year. Okay. Where I thought he was hunting picks. Okay. He stopped doing some of that toward the end of the year. He actually dropped a couple. But to start the season, I thought he was hunting picks. He was hunting counting stats to get paid. And that's not the way you play safety in this system. So yeah, that's my view is he will not be a Miami Dolphin. I think he will get paid. He has a lot of goodwill. Okay. And people are going to rely on that tape, man. They're going to rely on that tape from 2021 where he was one of the best 5 safeties in football.
Mm-hmm.
But since then, I guess it's a steady decline. He did have those injuries in 2023, but that's my view on it. He won't be here. He will get paid, and it's very likely he's going to be very, very good. But I completely support the Dolphins not paying him and not extending him at a big number.
Sticking with the defense, what would you do with the Bradley Chubb situation? Jalen Phillips, it's in a situation where he's injured again. And, you're probably not going to want to throw out an extension to him, especially after what you just learned from the Tua Tagovailoa situation. Chop Robinson ended up, for all of those Dolphin fans that were up in arms when we took Chop Robinson, they sure were eating crow come, defensive rookie of the year voting. So you got some options here. Plus you got a draft with a lot of good edge rushers. Where are you sitting with Bradley Chubb? Because if you do, you can restructure him for, what is it? Saves you about $13 million if you restructure him, I believe. Or you can basically almost fully get out of that and almost save about $19 million, I believe, if you just totally move off of him. Where are you at with the whole Bradley Chubb thing with this defense moving into next season and so many uncertainties at edge?
Well, that's a little bit different for me. I think and not that I care to do this, but if you want to emulate the current champions, okay, the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously you got to get after the quarterback. I always feel that the quickest way to a Super Bowl or the straightest path toward a Super Bowl is being able to throw the football and being able to stop the pass, okay? So if you're top 5 in those 2 categories, mostly in passer rating, yards per attempt, in both of those categories, and you could get to the passer, you're going to be one of like a handful of teams that has a real shot at making the Super Bowl. I don't know how you do that if you're just going to start rebuilding the edge room. And look, you can't rely on Jalen Phillips, okay? But he's going to be back, and he's going to be back at about $13 million a year. So he will be back. If you could get Bradley Chubb back, man, I keep calling this team the ham and no burger team, which means they always have one thing and they don't have the other. And then they'll have this that looks championship good. And then you have this other thing that doesn't look championship good, right? Look, if you bring back Bradley Chubb, I think that your edge group in Chop Robinson, Bradley Chubb, and Jalen Phillips, man, that's a really good group. And if you could sprinkle in a draft pick to be the 4th guy, and maybe you could find a Tyus Bowser at the minimum, just like you did this past season. Okay. And you still got Mo Camara.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you give Mo Camara a shot,
Yeah. So I would say that goes a long way to building one unit that you could just look at and say, we're done there. We don't have to add too much. And that should be top of the league good. So I'm a little bit more hesitant to get rid of Bradley Chubb, but they got to do something about his number because they can't pay him what he's on the books for this year. So I would be more inclined to bringing Bradley Chubb back for this season.
Are you happy given what was going to be out there and available, and plus just for continuity purposes. And hey, if we do move off McDaniel, he's a candidate to replace him as an interim. Are you happy that Anthony Weaver is staying here for another year? And are you excited for what you just talked about? Phillips should be back. Chubb should be healthy. We have the draft where maybe we can add a running mate with Sealer if obviously Calais isn't going to be back. If he isn't going to be back, maybe find a running mate with Tyrell Dodson and Jordan Brooks. Maybe hopefully sneak a good corner in there somewhere and rebuild that safety room. What are your thoughts on this defense in year 2? And are you happy with Weaver getting another year with potentially more talent from health and investment wise?
Yeah, they're finally going to have a little bit of continuity. Like the last time they had some continuity was under Flores, and they got some decent results. Not the results I would have liked against the better teams in the AFC, but where have we heard that before, right?
Yeah.
So we're finally getting a little bit of continuity on what is the new flavor. I understand Vic Fangio just won the Super Bowl, so everybody's going to be right back to their cover 6 stories, okay? But the flavor of the month, the flavor of the year has been those Mike McDaniel defenses and what the Ravens did in 2023. So yeah, I'm finally, I'm a bit excited to see what is the path forward. Unlike a lot of people I understand their numbers are good. I understand their final numbers, their counting stats were pretty good. Although I didn't like and I don't think anybody can like their pressure numbers this year, but there was an excuse for that. You didn't have your guys. All you had was Chop Robinson and a collection of guys on the outside, right? But I think you're finally going to have some continuity and you're going to have an opportunity to build on what you have already. And I think that what they have is the core of what could be a very, very good defense. But I don't think that they have that now. I think that they have to inject at least 3 draft picks and at least 2 contributors. They're going to need a defensive tackle. They're going to need a linebacker, no matter what. They got to rebuild the safety room. They got a lot of work to do this coming offseason and that defense, because unlike a lot of people that just like to look at the defense and say, oh, but they were top 10. They're fine. No, I didn't think they were very good this year. And you could chart it game for game. Like some of the biggest games,
That's what I'm going to say.
They completely fell apart against the Cardinals. They completely fell apart against the Bills the second time around. Those are games that, look, you win those 2 games, not only are you in the playoffs, but you avoid any of the big matchups, and you're probably going to Houston in the first round, and that would have been nice.
You're also making a statement with that Bills win. I mean, Alf, I don't know if you did the math, but they didn't have a stop in the final 41 minutes of that Bills game.
Yeah, I love the people. I love the people that blame. I love the people that blame Tua and the offense. They scored on every single drive in the second half, and they lost. And they had a lead at halftime. You explain to me how that happens. You know how that happens? When your defense can't stop anybody, and then they give up huge penalties on the deciding play. They bat a ball in the air, and Deshaun Hand can't find it. That would ice the game as well, right there. So it was just one thing after the other, but one thing is clear. This defense was not up to par. It wasn't up to par the previous year. It wasn't up to par this year. I think it needs a lot of help, but the good news is I think they're going to create enough cap space to help them, and I think they're going to have plenty of draft picks to sprinkle in talent on this defense, because I think that the offense, you got to tinker on offense. I think you got to overhaul big parts of the defense.
I mean, 2 guys, a 13. One's going to probably be on the board, and the other one would need to drop a little bit, man. But I'm telling you, I would love if this team's in a position where they got to choose between 2 teammates in terms of Will Johnson or Kenneth Grant at 13. I mean, even if those guys start slipping to 8 or not, I mean, even if Will Johnson starts slipping to 8, 9, 10, I'd be looking to potentially move up, because something I wanted to run by you. We got to ask if Fangio was right on certain things. And one thing he was very hesitant on was having X traveling, and we knew why. We saw we watched the tape. We knew he wasn't ready to travel a lot at once. But another guy who is really hesitant on doing that with was Jalen Ramsey. Now, I got the utmost respect for Jalen Ramsey. I think he's one of the better leaders on our team. I think he's one of the better defensive players or players on our team. But this season, we saw him trailing more than I can remember in recent memory in coverage. is it time to maybe have the discussion of, and this goes back to if Will Johnson falls on your lap and you got Kendall Fuller for another year and you got Cater Coe and you got see what maybe Cam Smith turns into. Is it time to have a discussion of if maybe safety a la Woodson and how Woodson shifted late in his career and how he was basically an all-pro at both and a Hall of Famer at both? Is it maybe the discussion to have, hey, maybe your path is trending towards the way of Woodson and you need to make that shift to safety? Is that a conversation you think needs to be thought about or had?
Yes, absolutely. And especially if you're lucky enough to have Will Johnson drop to you at 13,
Oh,
and I've already said this before. I've said this on our Discord server as well. I don't see many scenarios where if Will Johnson drops to you at 13, that he is not the BPA at that point.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay. So I understand Dolphin fans are like, oh my God, another corner. Yes, another corner. If Will Johnson is there, yes, they'll draft another corner. And well, I hope they'll draft another corner if Will Johnson is there. Okay. So yeah, I think so. I think this is the first year. Look, I think Vic Fangio was right about a few things. Look, the way he wanted to employ Andrew Van Ginkel, he didn't get it didn't pay the dividends that he expected it to pay. But a year later, they signed Zach Bond, who is not a similar player, but you could kind of see the vision, right?
You can.
And it actually did pay a lot of dividends for Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio had a little bit more static group as far as the guys where he played them. Anthony Weaver's not like that. Anthony Weaver's going to ask a lot of Jalen Ramsey. They asked a lot of Jalen Ramsey this past season, and I thought he had a fine season. Was he an all-pro? Probably not, because I don't think he finished up all that strong. But I will tell people this. Look, man, the problem is that people remember the game where he did get cooked. He got cooked by Garrett Wilson, but that was Aaron Rodgers at the height of his powers, and Garrett Wilson, who is a top 10 wide receiver. So yeah, that he had a bad game that game. Mm-hmm. Look at the rest of his season. If you look at the rest of his season, he was pretty damn good, but it was the first year that he was asked to do a lot. I think that we're close to that point where he's going to have to start transitioning to more of a safety and slot role, essentially playing like what Cooper DeJean, how he played this year for the Eagles. So yeah, I do see that conversation being had. And if Will Johnson is there, man, like I don't see many scenarios where Miami can get any more lucky than having Will Johnson drop to them at 13.
Yeah, I agree. Let's flip to the offensive side. Darrell Bevell staying. Bobby Slowik was just brought on as senior passing game coordinator. And I think we all pretty much were under the understanding, Alf, that if Bevell was leaving, Slowik was coming and just taking his spot. Like, that's exactly what was going to, like, Slowik was coming one way or another, whether Bevell was here or not. What are your thoughts on that move? I think, do you think it unlocks another layer to what we see in the progress of Tua Tagovailoa if he can stay healthy? Something we talked about before we went live here, and I said I believe is, I think one of the parts he was brought in here was more they want to instill more inside zone because we saw what they did with Joe Mixon. You know what I mean? What are your thoughts on the Slowik hire? And what are your thoughts on Darrell Bevell staying? Because another thing, Alf, you look at the minds Mike McDaniel surrounding himself with, you're kind of giving yourself no excuses to not get it done on offense, Alf.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Oh, I'm all for it. I love the signing. I think it's good to compartmentalize a little bit. There's an interview that Bill Parcells did not too long ago. It's on YouTube, man. If I can find the link, I'll get it out to you on Twitter. But Bill Parcells did an interview once where he was asked, what is the difference and which one do you prefer, a large coaching staff or a small coaching staff? And he said that in the old days, you always wanted a smaller coaching staff because there's less voices and the players know precisely where to go to get the information that they need and to get the teaching or the instruction that they need for game day and for the practice week, right? Mm-hmm. He says that as time has evolved, and Bill Belichick believed in this, by the way, more coaches, as long as you define their roles and you know what each guy is doing, is actually probably a better thing because not to be blunt about it, but in this ADHD world now where players just don't hold information all that well. If you have guys that are just strictly doing one thing and instructing players on one thing consistently, you tend to have a lot of cohesion. And the Dolphins have Frank Smith, who does the installs. They had Bev, who would work with Tua Tagovailoa as the quarterback's coach and passing game coordinator. And you had Mike McDaniel holding on to all these other hats, along with John Embry, who was working with tight ends, doing all these other things. And you had Welker essentially as a satellite. Now they're replacing Welker. So you had everybody in defined roles. If you add another guy, I think it's going to free up Mike McDaniel to do more head coachy things and being able to have his fingers in every single unit on the team instead of just the offense. So, yeah, I think another voice and new eyes, man. Quite frankly, teams get stale, man. Even championship teams get stale. And, we haven't won any championships, but, you could tell there's just a little bit of staleness to that offense this past season. So new eyes, new thoughts, new ideas are always welcomed. And it also opens up the door for possibly Mike McDaniel relinquishing his play calling duties, and maybe maybe Bev is the one who's going to call the plays, and Slowik can move into his role a little bit, and you could just move guys around back to the more defined roles, and it'll free up Mike McDaniel a little bit. But quite frankly, I like the idea mostly because you get new eyes on something that was already on what looked like a slight decline.
Yeah, I get it. And yeah, I think you made a lot of good points there, especially, talking about the new the fresh set of eyes. That's fresh set of eyes, fresh mind, fresh takes, right? So I want to stick with the quarterback situation there because we're kind of talking about it. What are your thoughts on this is a multi-layered question I'm about to ask you. Skylar Thompson, whoever convinced Greer this is the guy to continue investing in, and this is our quarterback too. Where are your thoughts on that? Should someone be, how is no one paying consequences for that? And then what are your thoughts of a quarterback contingency plan going into this draft and free agency? Now, I've said a guy I would look and target is Kirk Cousins, especially now that you have Slowik, who was with McDaniel. All three of them were in Washington together. I've talked about, hey, if you can get him for cheap, I'll trade a 5th or 6th round pick for Sam Howell. Or if you're going to trade for Geno Smith after they pay him the roster bonus, so you don't have to pay it. There's options here. Or you can draft a guy. I think Jackson Dart, we both think he's going to be way too rich for where we would like the Dolphins to take him if he was on the board. There's guys like McCord, Curtis Rourke, Seth Hennigan. I know a lot of Dolphin fans see the similarities between Dylan Gabriel, but I want nothing to do with that 5'11" quarterback. I'm good on that. What are your? I'm fearful they're going to like Quinn Ewers a lot, though. Things I've heard privately and watching the tape, I'm so fearful they're going to like Quinn Ewers a lot. Where do you stand on? Should someone have had consequences for the contingency plan going upwards, and now the new contingency plan? What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that they managed to pass the buck perfectly. Essentially, everybody blamed each other, and all they have is still the body of work, right?
Yeah.
So I think that they're going to invest a lot of resources at quarterback this year. I think they'll have a veteran and possibly a draft pick.
Okay.
I think they'll have a developmental guy be the third guy, and that second guy, I believe, will be expensive. Now, here's the good news on Kirk Cousins. If you saw him on coverage of the NFC Championship game, man, did he look comfortable as a guy ready to go into media? So maybe he knows that his starting days in the NFL are probably behind him. I do believe that the Jets are going to look strongly at Russell Wilson and not Kirk Cousins, because I know that some people they're going to go after Kirk Cousins now. I don't think so. I think that the Jet target is probably going to be Russell Wilson. Like, that's who's going to be their bridge quarterback until they get to their next quarterback.
Okay.
But Kirk Cousins, I think, could be available. I think that there's a distinct possibility that he could be available to the Dolphins. It won't be cheap. You're thinking something like a $10 million guarantee. with escalators if he actually has to start games. So, but they painted themselves into this corner. What I'm really interested in, look, I know that they're going to spend money and they're going to get a capable backup because they know where last season ended because of that, right? But I'm interested to see what they're going to do with QB3 because QB3, I think, is going to have to be a special resource. Okay. I don't think that you're just going to go out there in the UDFA market and find QB3. And that's kind of what I considered. I know that they used a 7th round pick on Skylar Thompson, but Skylar Thompson, let's face it, he was a UDFA product. He should have never been drafted. All right.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're going to use that type of resource. I think they might even use a draft pick. And I'm wondering, what is their vision for what is they're going to be their new developmental guy. Because I know some people have said, maybe they invest in a younger prospect, the guy who has yet to develop. The guy in Dallas, his name escapes me because he was so bad.
Cooper Rush?
No, not Cooper Rush. They're QB3.
Yeah.
You see, he was so forgettable that we even forgot his name. Okay, and he was a 1st round pick. Okay, so what the hell was his name, right? From North Dakota State.
Trey Lance,
right? So I don't think that's going to happen, man. Okay,
I don't want that.
I do think that it's a possibility because they kind of laid the groundwork for it, right? Where you want somebody who's completely opposite of Tua Tagovailoa to be the QB2 in case you have to start him for 4 games. So I would watch Justin Fields. Not that I have any information on that, but I will watch Justin Fields, and maybe that's the vision going forward. Because in the musical game of quarterbacks, man, I think that the music's going to stop, and where's Justin Fields going to sit? Right?
Let me ask you this. So this video with us is going to come out while I'm in Vegas. All right. And right before this video comes out, I've got one video scheduled to come out. And so it's already going to be out, and my viewers have already going to watch it by the time they watch this. What about Joe Milton? You saw what he did against the Buffalo. That was very, listen, you can write off. He didn't look good he had flashes in the preseason, but you still saw the issues, right? You saw the issues of coming from a 1-read RPO offense. You saw the issues of not really being a great processor. You saw the issues of, you could throw guys into windows, but you're not an anticipatory guy. No one's going to label you as that. You saw the issues as a passer, but the mechanics from the throwing motion, arm, the release, and the cannon was always there, right? I mean, you can write off those preseason games, but he was those backups in Buffalo that he faced. Those are legitimate backups throughout the NFL. They're not guys who are going to be stocking shelf playing in the 4th quarter of preseason game 3. These are guys who are legitimate backups in the NFL, and he was explosive and his best play of the game was the touchdown that didn't count, and that was on the receiver. I mean, he was out of this world in that game when he played in certain moments, and he's 25. And the rumor is they're looking for a 3rd round pick, but I don't think they're going to get that. And the reason why I say this, I would call them and say, listen, I will give you a 4th. If you're down to you got 2 4th round picks. You got the compensatory pick and you got our own. I would offer them one of those picks. And I'll tell you this why, Alf. Other than Milroe, who I think needs 2 years to develop, same course as Jordan Love needed, Jackson Dart, Shador, and of course, Cam. There's no quarterbacks I would draft in the first 4 rounds. And ask yourself this question. After there's those 4 guys, based on his tools alone, you'd probably have Milton a little higher than guys like Quinn Ewers in terms of, because now you're getting into the 4th, 5th round where you're investing in the development of the guy. It's not so much I need you to start right away. But I go even further, Alf. He's had a year of NFL coaching. And I know you watched him. If you go and watch him in the preseason to where you watch him in that Bills game, it is clear the jump in the development in just one season of real NFL coaching. What are your thoughts on maybe ponying up a 4th round pick for Joe Milton? Because there's probably not going to be a lot of options in the 4th round better than that.
I'm absolutely for it. And I'll tell you another thing. This is the anti-Josh Rosen. When they traded a second-round pick for Josh Rosen, I was like, why?
Yeah, no,
And
yeah.
a lot of people say, oh, it's only 1 year. And I'm like, no, but it's that year. The year you saw from Josh Rosen essentially told you everything you needed to know. You knew there was nothing there. You knew that there was no further development that could be had. Because when you have just essentially one of the worst years any quarterback has ever had, then it's pretty much over. Like, there's nothing else to look forward to. Milton's a little bit different, man. Milton's actually an ascending talent.
Yeah.
And, I would absolutely trade a 4th-round pick. I think it's a no-brainer. If he was in this class, he's obviously ahead of Milroe. And some people think that Milroe is getting day 2 buzz. So is he QB4? I would say easily. Is he even QB3? Possibly. So, yeah, I would trade a 4th-round pick for Milton in a heartbeat. I don't understand why the Patriots would part ways, though. I'll tell you that right now, because if anybody's been paying attention, and I keep talking about this because I just find it interesting. Let's use that word, that Drake May was checked this year. Look, Drake May didn't lead the league in many things, but he did lead the league in one stat, and that was trips to the Brew Medical Tent. Okay?
Yeah.
He had 5 of them. Okay? He was checked for 5 concussions this past season. He was diagnosed with 1. I guess, he was lucky, right? So, yeah, let's just say that Drake May.
Pro Bowler Drake May.
Yeah, Pro Bowler Drake May. Yeah, okay. Yeah, oh my God, man. But let's just say, and
I'm a
part of the reason why you
Drake
don't find me on Twitter is because I had one guy arguing with me that he definitely deserved to be in the Pro Bowl.
Oh,
and
I
was like, man, he was
of Drake May. He's not a Pro Bowler though.
Yeah, he's not a Pro Bowler.
No.
He was clear cut the worst quarterback in the AFC East. Period. Okay. And look, Aaron Rodgers had 28 touchdowns. All right.
That's only because Aaron Rodgers played us twice, though. Let's be honest.
Yeah, but let's face it, Drake May had the season that Tua had in season 2, and Tua was called a bust. Okay, so I'm not a fan of Drake May, but he had some injury issues. I think if I were the Patriots, I would keep my eyes wide open, my eyes clear, my heart wide open to possibly thinking about the very real possibility that Drake may not be it going forward. And I would keep my options open with somebody like Joe Milton. But if he is available, a 4th-round pick for him, yeah, sign me up like now.
Yeah, there was a report at the beginning of February that he's available, and an executive thinks it's going to cost around a 3rd-round pick right now. And teams started calling, like Steve, what's his name, Pazzolo, the guy used to be with PFF. He said that teams were calling right after that Bills game and trying to figure out, hey, is Milton available? Blah 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 blah. The offensive line, Alf. The guard situation was a disaster, and then it was made because, we just talked about one thing. We just talked about the quarterback contingency plan, but then why were no consequences paid, and why was no one sent to the chopping block for y'all? We found out you guys knew Isaiah Wynn had a setback in rehab, and someone convinced all of you, hey, Robert Jones, we can make it work. It was bad enough. Someone had already convinced you all Liam Eichenberg could work right in replacement of Robert Hunt. You already bought into that. But they had no contingency plan on the offensive line either, really, Alf, other than what? Patrick Paul. And then they tried to sell me in the postseason conference that Keon Smith, we really met. Give me a break. Okay. What are your thoughts on this offensive line right now? Because they ran a lot of 21 and 12 personnel last year. They had an uptick in that, of course. Julian Hill was awful. Okay. I was telling Omar last year, this guy is not it. And tight end is the next evolution. And Jonnu Smith is not a reliable enough blocker. Durham Smythe seems to have lost all of his confidence because they put all of their confidence in the Julian Hill bucket, and that left him a shell of his former self. So, and that affected our blocking as well. What are your thoughts on this offensive line? Because can they get this right heading in? This is the biggest question of all. Can they fix all of this? This is the number one priority heading into next season, Alf.
Yeah, they're gonna need 2 new guards, and depending on what happens with Teron Armstead, they might need a swing tackle as well. Now, here's the thing. They seemed, I don't know if you saw the interviews that Teron Armstead did at the Super Bowl.
Sounds like he's coming back.
Yeah, he sounds like a guy that's going to come back on a 1-year guaranteed deal with
Yeah.
some incentives, right? If he comes back, that goes a long way to helping you a little bit, okay? Because then Patrick Paul goes to the swing, and you don't have that much more work to do, okay? You're still going to need a tackle. No matter what, you're just going to have to invest in a tackle, and if it's not in the draft, getting somebody who's versatile that can play guard and tackle, it's probably going to be in free agency, a lower-level tackle that you can trust. So that way you don't have to turn to the Jackson Carmens of the world later on in the season. But you need 2 new guards, okay? Personally speaking, I would never draft a guard in the first round, okay, unless it's Quentin Nelson. I don't see Quentin Nelson in this draft. There's a couple of nice ones. I like Miles Frazier a lot, but he's not a first-round talent. So I'm not drafting a guard in the first round, but I am spending in free agency. Now, am I going to go crazy? Am I going to get into the Trey Smith sweepstakes? No. But can you find adequate guard play for, like, let's say 4 to 5 million APY? Yes, I think you can. Okay, there's guys like Will Hernandez. You got Dane Brunskill is a guy who's very, very capable.
Aaron
James
Banks will
Daniels,
have familiarity.
yeah, also James Daniels is also going to be available. And you know, it's a great thing. All those guys have injury histories, which means that he's perfect for us. Okay.
Yeah, and they're cheaper.
All right. And they're cheaper. But look, that's part of the market inefficiency that the Dolphins tried to exploit, and it's absolutely blown up in their face.
Yeah.
Okay. They try to get better players at cheaper prices because they've had injury histories. The problem is that those guys have gotten injured here. All right.
Yeah.
But some of those guys are guys that have been very, very durable until very recent injuries. So I think that those are good players to invest in. They need 2 guards, man. Because the way I try to explain it to everybody is this. While most teams have a 45-play, 50-play install, right, for game day, and sometimes, you know, there's teams that have 80-play installs, but that's just too much, okay? But, like, let's say you have the usual install, which is a 40 to 45-play install for a Sunday. The Dolphins install has a 40-45-play install, but you're only really comfortable in running maybe 35 of them because 10 of them require good guard play, and you just don't trust it. So I'm suggesting upgrade those positions so that way when you do an install and you go into game day, you have confidence in the entire install and not just the select number of plays you know you can run. You know, the certain number of outside zones you can run because you have the personnel there to run it.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what I'm going to be watching like a hawk. Here's the good news. The bad news is they haven't been pretty good in the past at evaluating offensive line talent. The good news is that they've shown the last few years that whenever they identify a problem, they tend to spam the hell out of it.
Yeah.
So if they send a lot of resources to fixing the guards this year, I'm going to be all for it, and it'll be a welcome change. But it's what I'm going to be watching March 12th. Like March 12th, I'm going to be watching above all else who are the guards that they're going to bring in here, because I think that they need 2 starting caliber guards.
They need to double dip because you need the depth rebuilt in that guard. I don't think I wouldn't go back to Robert Jones and Liam Eichenberg, and I'm really I'm fearful they're going to bring Liam Eichenberg back as depth. Brother, I'm going to tell you this: at 48, oh my God, if I'm in love, one of my biggest man crushes of this draft. If Jonas Savannah is on that board at 48, my friend.
Well, there's a lot of nice players. There's a lot of nice players for that second round.
But here's the thing: where we're at. You know, I think it's a little bit more complex at tackle than just a swing, because you can't rely on Jackson, or you technically need 2 swings because Jackson and Armstead can't stay healthy. So you need, and I think Lamb, obviously retire, brother, because what we saw last year, you're just not the same. And I think you need 2 legitimate swings here potentially. And if you get the right tackle, maybe he makes it easier to move off Jackson when that contract runs up, because we got him at good value, but we have not been, he's getting paid more money, more million. The number of millions of dollars he's getting paid a year is more than the number of games we're getting a year from him right now. And that's just not, it's the same with Armstead, except he's younger and he's not as good, nearly as good. So, you put up with Armstead because when this guy's on, Armstead's a top 3, top 5 tackle in the NFL.
Yeah, I've told people before, would you pay $1 million a game for Teron Armstead?
Put up with that. That's why you put up with him.
I would pay $1 million a game for Teron Armstead.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you can't say the same for Austin Jackson. And that's where I think we need to find potentially a running mate for Patrick Paul. But I do agree with you. Like, there isn't no Quentin Nelson. I would agree with that. I think probably, your best guard options are converting Will Campbell, are converting Kelvin Banks or Membo, or probably Tyler Booker. I like Miles Frazier, like you mentioned as well. It's a decent guard class, but I love Jonas Van Ney. And why I love him, Alf, is you can kick him in at right guard, and I think he gives you that good moving, dominant bully who can get out in open space into the second level that Robert Hunt was. But I think he's a little bit of a better athlete and a mover for his size. But he can also kick out to right tackle when Jackson's out. You got a guy that you can kick out there. So that's why what you said earlier is kind of key where I'm at. I'm targeting tackles that can play guards in this draft, or guards that can play tackles. Like I'm just like you. I'm targeting that in free agency and the draft. And I'm saying it for quarterback and the offensive line. I'm double dipping. I'm going in free agency and I'm going in the draft. So, we need better contingency plans. I don't know what else to say, but sticking with coaching, let's stick with there. We talked about 21-12 personnel. What are your thoughts on the tight end? Because a lot of people on Dolphins Twitter want Tyler Warren at 13 when they balked at me when I said we should move up for Brock Bowers because he's generational and then he becomes the best tight end in year one. But what do I know? What are your thoughts? Because you look at, this is one of the most stacked classes. You look at Gunnar had the playmaking potential of Gunnar Helm. I mean, you look at like Colson Loveland is the number 1 tight end on some teams' boards. I think Tyler Warren's the number 1 guy. You got Aronde Gatson or Mason Taylor. You can continue legacy players here. I think Mason Taylor would be great. You got your boy, Elijah over there in Miami. There's, my guy, Luke Lachey, who I think would be going much higher if he didn't have an injury history. This is a stacked tight end class. And there's a lot of guys who can do both in terms of offer you stuff at the catch point or after the catch plus block. What are your thoughts on this tight end class? Because Julian Hill and Durham Smythe, I think we got to upgrade behind Jonnu Smith, Alf.
Yeah, absolutely. They got to be able to play some 12 personnel. That's the next evolution on this offense. Yeah. And they really can't. I'm very, very high on Tyler Warren. He allows you to play and you got to start thinking about life without Tyreek Hill, possibly even this season. Although some people assure me that he's not getting traded, but we shall see, right? But Tyler Warren is a guy who does pretty much everything you can ask from an inline tight end, can also play in the slot. I'm a much bigger for a legacy project. I'm a much bigger fan of Mason Taylor than I am Aronde Gadsden Jr. Aronde Gadsden Jr., as far as I understand, has had issues holding weight. And he's more of a giant wide receiver. Okay?
Yeah, big slot.
And I'm not interested in that. We had that already. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to repeat that mistake. So it's a loaded class, but they got to rebuild that entire room. You got Jonnu Smith and not much else. Julian Hill was a guy you expected to develop. He had a much better second half of his season than it was in the first half. But he's kind of one-dimensional. And if you want to find a one-dimensional tight end, man, you got one on the practice squad. Hayden Rucci could just do that one dimension. You want a guy in line to just combo block and move to the second level or hit cutoffs. Yeah, Hayden Rucci could do that. Like
Yep.
you can find guys to do that in this league. What's harder to find is guys that can do that and also get out on pass patterns and
Harold
time
Fannin.
patterns with our wide receivers.
Mm.
So, you know, that in that regard, it's a smaller group. So, yeah, they need to rebuild this entire group.
Like, I think they would love Harold Fannin and Alf because he can offer you the H-back role. He can go in the fullback. He can go inline. He can go slot. Like, I actually think they're going to – Harold Fannin is a name where I quietly think because of the value of where they might be able to get him at in the draft, I think Harold Fannin is a quiet one to look out for at tight end for them. So, yeah.
No, yeah, it's all on the table, especially at 48. I think it's all on the table. I don't know if it's on the table at 13. I think at 13, it's only Tyler Warren, the only guy that they could possibly go after. But I don't think he's going to make it to 13. So I think that's going to be solved. That's
crazy that he gets drafted higher than Bowers.
I think people are going to have a very, very fresh memory of Brock Bowers in their mind.
Yeah,
and
recency bias. Right?
Yeah, and somebody's going to look at him and say, look, he's the piece. He's the piece we need to finish up our offense. We're taking him now.
Yeah, he's just not the playmaker that Bowers is, though, after the catch. That Bowers is generational at that position after the catch, man. All right, so I wanted to stick with one more position here because a guy who, hey, if he's there at 8 or 9, I know they're really interested in Rome Odunze last year. And I know they're really interested if he's going to be getting outside of that 10, and they were kind of sniffing around. Ted McMillan, if he's there at 8 or 9, I wouldn't be shocked that they're sniffing around to see how much it costs. But Wes Welker, and another thing too, another guy I'm fearful they're going to draft, and I think he's going to be great, but I think there's other guys that are higher. I think this team's going to really like Emeka Egbuka. Like, I think they're going to really like Emeka Egbuka for what he does as a blocker, for a route runner. Like, he can offer you slaughter outside versatility. The interviews, the people at Ohio State, you can ask former players to them. They're all going to say he's the best one to come out. Like, he's going to interview through. I'm really worried. But what are your thoughts on that wide receiver room? We'll talk about Tyreek in a bit, but that wide receiver room going forward behind the top two. And was Welker a scapegoat? Did he feel like a scapegoat a little bit for everything that happened with Tyreek? And how do you see that?
I don't think so. I think that Welker there's no upward mobility here. And I think Welker was being done a favor, essentially. Like, they were thinking, look, we're going to try to interject a new voice into this room because this room needs help. So we're going to make this change here because there's no upward mobility for you in this organization. Like, he wasn't going to move up to offensive coordinator. All right. And I think Welker elsewhere might have some upward mobility. So I think they did him a favor in that regard. As far as Ted McMillan, man, I hate to say this because I'm saddling him with a bad comparable, but I get a lot of Keon Coleman vibes at the catch point. And that's not something I'm interested in ever revisiting ever again. I like separators. I like speed. I love Egbuka. I think he's a guy where, man, you could have a serious run and you're left with him at 13 and you might have to make a very, very strong decision as far as, what is our evaluation of guys behind him? And should we just take him here at 13? Because you got to make 13 count. It has to be an impact player. I don't like settling at 13.
I agree.
Okay. Yeah. So if you're taking the third offensive tackle, and I know everybody says, oh, but he was number 1 on our board. That's bullshit. Okay. Usually when you're taking the third offensive tackle, and if you take him at 13, you probably didn't get the guy who you had tops on your board, right?
Yeah.
Defensive tackle is so deep that you're going to be able to pass at 13 and double back at 48, and you're going to get a really nice player that you could pair next to Zach Sealer. So this wide receiver room needs a lot of help, man.
Yeah.
The good news is that you have your developmental guys already in tow, and you have a young guy who you like. I like Malik Washington going forward, and we still yet to see Taj Washington, who will be the developmental guy this coming season. So you have the makings of what could be a pretty damn good group, but you probably need a free agent and you need a draft pick. So yeah, that wide receiver room needs plenty of help. Ted McMillan, I get the vision,
I
but
see Drake London on steroids.
I just get those bad Keon Coleman vibes.
I see Drake London on steroids. That's what I see when I see Ted McMillan. I was a huge Drake London guy, but I look at Ted McMillan. I look at Ibuka. I even look at guys like Besh and Savion Williams. Even what's his face from Iowa, Higgins.
Yeah.
I look at these guys, and that's what those are the size guys we need. It's like, right? Like, I would have no interest in like a Luther Burden. Like, we don't need another one of 5'11", 6-foot speedster guy. We don't need that, right? Like, we need one of those guys with that 6'2" to 6'4" frame that can win at the catch point, that can offer us something in the red zone that we really don't have, and give us a reason to actually run those fades, or you know what I mean? But I could see people were very indifferent on Drake London too. So I get it. Tet seems like an acquired taste, like Drake London was to a lot of people. So I love Tet McMillan. I look at, he's kind of prototypically what we're missing next to the speed, as well as those other guys I named. So
how is he looking? I don't know, because I haven't looked. Cause I think today, I think all the invites already went out, but I think today they were getting some confirmations. How is Ted McMillan looking for the combine? He's confirmed, right, to work out?
Oh, I think 110% he's going to work out. I know he got the invite.
Okay.
I haven't like looked into confirmations or whatever.
Yeah, because he's time dependent, man. If he fires off a number, then the Dolphins might not even have an opportunity to take him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
well, that's another thing. Like, I know you're big on, you made a good point about how stacked this, there's over 41 defensive tackles invited to the combine this year. It's a stacked defensive tackles. I'm a huge Deon Walker guy, especially if Weaver can mold them the way he's molded other big defensive linemen. Obviously, pad level is going to be an issue. That leverage game is going to have to do something. But Kenneth Grant, dude, at 13, this guy's clock going 18.75 miles per hour at that size, doing Turkish get-ups with a 150-pound dumbbell. Like, and you watch the tape. I mean, Kenneth Grant could be the best defensive tackle in this class. And I'm going to be honest with you. I agree with you. This is a stacked defensive tackle class, but he might be too good to pass up at 13.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not, it's a really, really good group. And I was looking at a few guys, and there was one guy that I was watching his tape, man, and I can't believe I forgot his name, but he's a lower round prospect. When I get a chance, I'm going to fire it off to you. And I was looking at it, I'm like, man, this is like day 2 stuff here. And he has a terrible evaluation, but a lot of these guys are going to test. And when they don't test well, that's when, they get their confirmation, and all the scouts are going to be right back to where they were originally. And they're going to say, okay, this is why he was a day 3 guy. But sometimes for guys like a defensive tackle or even an offensive guard, man, I don't really care about measurables all that much. I want to turn on the tape. I want to see what they do on game day. But yeah, defensive tackle is such a loaded position this year in the draft that it might almost be irresponsible to take one at 13 when
it's kind of like tight end.
Yeah, it's kind of like tight end where there's like maybe you have a defined group of 1, 2, or 3 guys at tight end that you think are the top end talents. And it might be the same in defensive tackle.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at defensive tackle, the difference is almost minuscule when you get from the top talents to the bottom end talents. Well, not bottom end talents, but the bottom end of like day 2.
Yeah.
I
know what you're saying. Yeah.
So, the more I look at this draft, man, this is a draft you got to have as many top 100 picks as you can. And that's what I always care about. I always tell people, because people tell me, oh, what do you think about using the 6th round pick? And I always say the same thing. I don't care. Okay. Like, and sometimes you could tell that the Dolphins just let the interns make the picks in round 6.
Yeah. They let the scouting department go to work, right?
Yeah, like, they tell the scouting department, all right, here's where you guys get to take all your pet projects. You know what I mean?
That's who took Patrick McMorris. That was the scouting department. They were the ones pushing for Patrick McMorris to be taken, right?
Right. But those top 100 picks,
Yeah, that's
Those
where
are
you make your bread and
gold to
butter.
me.
Yeah,
Those are gold. You got to hit on those. You got to
Yeah.
find contributors in those.
Agreed.
So I'm glad Miami has a pretty nice contingent this year. They have a nice war chest of picks. And if you could start adding more, although I'm not advocating moving out of 13 because I think that there's an impact player at 13. I want that impact player. But if you could massage this draft and maybe use 48 to add a couple more picks in the top 75, I absolutely would do it.
So let me ask you this. Two more things here. Number one, Tyreek. We're talking about receivers in this draft. What do you do with Tyreek? How do you think this playing out? Are they just playing nice? I mean, we all know about the recent report with the Chargers and the Cowboys and the Bill Simmons podcast. And then he's spitting a whole different thing on the Kay Adams show and Pro Football Talk. How do you see this going? Because I don't know if you happen to see it, Alf, but you should go watch it. After that all went down, he quit on the team. Go watch the first episode of Finish Line I did with Richmond. And brother, Alf, you need to look in Richmond's eyes. And he basically said, you can't trust this. Like, if I was in the room with him, as great as you are, I can't ever trust you again. I said on the show, on a show last week, hey, I wouldn't even let him ever be a captain again. Like, he shouldn't even be an option to be voted if they mend the fences. How do you see this working out with Tyreek, and what would you do?
Well, I disagree in one regard. I don't like the idea of barring people from the ballot. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Because that's something that's something that Flores did, and the players resented the hell out of him. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
So I will put Tyreek in the ballot, and if the players vote him captain, I guess they voted him captain. You know what I mean? But I'll tell you this: I have a hard time, and I know this is counterintuitive. People will be like, "What? What did Alf say? That makes no sense." Look, I'm going to put it as plainly as possible. I don't envision a scenario where the Dolphins improve and Tyreek is on the roster. Okay? I just don't. I think that ceiling is still right there at 11 wins. And maybe you get lucky. The Bills have a down year and you win the division title. Like, that's a possibility. It happens all the time. You know, mediocre teams win divisions. It happens. Maybe the Bills take a couple of injuries and you win the division title with 10 wins, with 11 wins. That could happen. But championship good, I just don't envision it with Tyreek Hill on the roster. But I do envision a scenario where you get him off the roster. That boosts Jalen Waddle into wide receiver 1. You get the most out of Jalen Waddle. You can use some of that money that you'll save post June 1st to get guys to play next to Jalen Waddle. You use a draft pick. Maybe you get into the bidding for a guy who, maybe somebody like a Darius Slayton or something, that could take up some of the slack, the speed slack that'll be missing from Tyreek Hill not being here. And I do see the Dolphins taking a step forward in that regard. If they keep him, man, unless he's willing to give money back, which he's not, I don't see how they can improve this team with him on the roster. What he did this past season, and it's also diminishing returns. Like, he's older, speed guys past 30. That the cliff is coming. You don't know what year it could be. I think maybe he has one good year left in him, but it's not only that he quit on you week 18. It's his body language throughout the year when Tua wasn't playing.
Yeah.
And I got pretty good evidence and pretty good information to suggest that he's one of these guys that just as soon just go home and not play when Tua's not playing. Okay? He's one of these guys who will be like, no Tua, I don't play. It's very likely he's been wanting to quit all year whenever Tua was not in the lineup. All right? But then you have the drops. Then you have all these embarrassing episodes. Slaps a guy at the marina. All right? And then you have this thing where he's testifying in open court that he has a gigantism fetish, and that's why he broke the plus size OnlyFans model's leg. And it's just one embarrassment after the other with this guy. Mm-hmm. And you don't know when the main shoe is going to drop. He's actually going to do something. His house burns down right before the playoffs.
Mhm.
Do you think that we got an actually completely focused Tyreek Hill last year?
No. That's why he
So
led
it's
the league in
been
drops.
it's one thing or the other with this guy, and it's not to say that it was a bad experience. It was a great experience. He gave you two of the best wide receiver seasons in franchise history, and he helped Tua Tagovailoa with his confidence. He helped his offense get on track, but it's time to start thinking about maybe your investment in him has run its course. You had a beginning; it was a great beginning. You had a middle; it was a good middle, and you have an end, and it's a bad end. So. Maybe it's run the court, and it's not that it was a bad draft. I mean, a bad trade. It was a great trade. You got as much as you could out of him, but maybe now it's time to say goodbye, and maybe just holding on for that one last season. Some people might pay with their jobs with it. You know what I mean? And I don't know if they want to be. I don't know if they want to stick around to see the consequences of another bad season that could be even at the hands of somebody like Tyreek Hill. Because
So
what
let
if
me
he gets
ask-
suspended? What if this is the year he gets suspended for something he does?
Yeah,
You know?
So let me ask you this. Do you think their window to win is closed with Tyreek, and the best way to keep it open is to get rid of him?
Yeah, the best way, look, their window to win with Tyreek is this year, and it's not a good window. It's one of those windows where you're just peeking out of a blind. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. If you get rid of them, your window's kind of open for a nice little 2-year run here before some of these. Look, my partner on the podcast, Chris Kaufman, he likes to talk about what are real cap apocalypses. Capocalypses. Dolphins are not in one, but they will be in one in about 2 years. The Eagles are going to be in one of the most epic capocalypses in the history of capocalypses,
But
and
they
I
got the
believe in
wins.
2028. Because I think they have 5 guys under contract in 2028 for like $290 million. Okay.
Jeez.
And 4 of them won't be on the roster. So they're going to have in excess of $200 million in dead cap in like 2028. All right. So the Eagles have a real one coming. Dolphins have one coming in 2 years. If you get rid of Tyreek now, you have a jump on the build for 2026, and you extend your window, I think, by about 2 years into a nice little 2-year window until about 2027, until you have to start making serious choices. Meaning, you probably have to start thinking about replacing a Zach Sealer. Jalen Ramsey will be replaced by then. You have to start thinking about, Jalen Waddle's second contract, or I mean his third contract. So, Jonnu Smith will be gone. That's 2027. But if you get rid of Tyreek Hill now, you'll extend that window a little bit more. If you keep him, the window is this year, and then you're basically stopping your growth or your evolution to the next build by a year. So, yeah, I would rip off that Band-Aid if I could. I don't think they will. I think that they're going to try to make it work,
Yeah.
and who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. And maybe
Well, I don't
he
think
has a
you're wrong
monster
because
year.
I think they're desperate to win.
Yeah, they're desperate to win, and maybe he has a monster year. They have a great year. They win the division. They win playoff games, and maybe I'm completely wrong.
I don't think.
But
No, I don't think you are.
the history has shown that this is not going to end well with Tyreek. So why not rip off the Band-Aid? You've had a good run with him.
Yeah. I'll tell you why, because their backs are on the wall, up against the wall. They could potentially be dead man walking, and they're not going to take a talent like that off the roster because they think, which I agree with you, they think the opposite of us. They think that'll make them worse.
Yeah.
That's it. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to add where people can find you? Let the people know.
Yeah, if you didn't get enough of me on this podcast and you want to get more of us, of course you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. We're pretty much everywhere. Anywhere you get your podcasts, it's the number 3 yards per carry, Spotify, Apple, anywhere. We drop twice a week. During draft season, we drop a little bit more often. We got other shows on our feed, so you can listen to those shows as well. We have Scotty and the Fins on our feed as well. Those guys just getting started, and they're getting some good guests. They have Jackson Slater on this week. They're doing prospect interviews. Jackson Slater, I don't know. Do you have an opinion on Jackson Slater, Sacramento State tackle?
Yeah, him and Clay Webb are fighting for spot on my man crush list.
Okay, well, he's on our feed right now. We have an interview with him. an hour-long interview with Jackson Slater on our feed right now. We're going to be doing them all throughout the draft season. But if you want to be a member of our Discord right here, OnlyFins, you got to go to discord.gg/OnlyFins, and you become a member there for $4.99 a month.
Awesome. Well, always a pleasure doing this, Alf. Always good information, good conversation. And hey, until the next time I have you back on, I appreciate you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
As always, smash that like button, subscribe. We are just a couple thousand away from 20,000. So let's get there, people. I got a big giveaway planned, so multiple winners. So let's get there. Until then, I'll see you on the next one. Fins up all day, every day.